I think we're recording. Does it? Yeah. Melissa, can you tell if it's recording? Because I have it just like it is. Normally I have a thing that says record.
I have a thing at the top that says record.
Good. Oh, there it is. I see it now. It's real small. Okay. I'll let Roger go ahead and start on this. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks for joining us this morning. For those of you who don't know me, which I think is not very many, but some of you probably don't. I'm Roger Carswell. I'm director of the Southeast Kansas Library System, although not for much longer. I'll be retiring at the end of June. And today's topic is budgeting and finance for public libraries. I will say I'm going to be trying to address all types of libraries, all types of public libraries. If you are a city, county, or township library, the law and budgeting and so forth is identical for all of you. I may only say city council at some point, but it applies equally well to the county commission or the township board if you're a township or county library. Everything applies equally. For those of you who are from a district library, there are some differences, as you're aware of, and I will try to make sure I note those differences when they come up. There aren't too many of them. I mean, the budgeting process is all pretty similar, but there are some differences, and I will be sure and mention that. And call me out if I go past and you think I haven't addressed it, something that's different for a district library. I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint here on my screen shortly. I have had sometimes when I've shared the PowerPoint where I don't see the chat. I think I'm going to see the chat, but just in case I don't see what's in chat, Eric, would you be sure and relay any questions, and I'll try to ask for that at some logical breaking points. But if I keep going, just interrupt me, and I can handle that and can answer the questions that are in chat. All right, let's go ahead and try to share the screen here. Okay, I think you should be seeing that. Can you confirm that? And actually, I'm not seeing chat. I am seeing the participants list. Well, I'm seeing the little boxes, but I'm not seeing chat, so I won't be able to.
I see chat, so I can help you with that.
Oh, I'm going to stop this. My slides are not advancing, so I'm going to go back to here and share again, and then start the slideshow from scratch, and hopefully that takes care of it. Okay, there we go. So we're going to start with a top 10 list here. Top 10 mistakes that boards and librarians can make on budgets and finance. At number 10 is not knowing how the city or county or township budget process works. If you're a district, it's kind of your own process. You do need to know how it fits into the overall budget process. But those of you who are libraries of another municipality, a city, county, or township, you need to know how that city's process works. When do they expect to get the budget from you? Who does it go to? Who do you get information from, or who do you give information to? All that is stuff that's going to be important for you to know as you go through the budgeting. Number 9, not knowing how much a mill raises in your municipality. A mill is not a dollar amount. It's a proportion, and a mill doesn't tell you how much money you're getting. So you need to know how much a mill raises in your municipality in order to know, if we raise the budget a half mil, drop it a $250,000, whatever it is. How much money are we really talking about there? Not knowing the sources of your revenue. We will actually have a little bit later on in this presentation on different sources of revenue and look at that a little more. But you do need to know what those are. And I'm going to start here with what I'm calling horror story number 1. These are all true stories, which makes them scarier, I guess, for horror stories. We had a library once, quite a few years ago now, that the treasurer of the board gave me a call, and she was a pretty new treasurer. She just joined sometime within the past year. And she was new on the board, I should say, and had become treasurer. She says, I don't know, we're just running out of money. I don't know how we're going to get by. I'm trying to figure this out. And as we got into it, turns out they hadn't received a tax distribution from the city in like a year and a half. Now, I don't know how many of you could survive a year and a half without getting any of your tax income from your city or other taxing district. But in this case, the city, which is a small town, very small town, had a new city clerk or city treasurer, one or the other, and didn't know she was supposed to automatically pass the library's money on. And the treasurer, and I think the librarian was also new at that point, didn't know that they were supposed to get a check from the city. And so the money just sat there in the city's coffers for a year and a half before it was all figured out. Number 7, and this is one that applies to boards. Micromanaging by not allowing the librarian to make most spending decisions within budget constraints. We'll also talk a little later about proper board and director roles, but once the budget is adopted, the director, the librarian, should have the authority to make those spending decisions. Not paying attention to financial reports. You can't really monitor your budget if you're not paying attention to the financial reports that you should be getting. But even more important than that, number 5 on the top 10 budget mistakes, not receiving financial reports, or at least not financial reports that compare actual income and expenditures to budget. There's just no way you can effectively monitor how you're doing financially if you don't have a financial report that compares your income and your expenditures to what you have in the budget as your expectations. And I should say on number 5, that's another one that also ties into horror story number 1, in that if they had been receiving financial reports that showed here's how much we expect to get from the city and here's how much we've actually got, it would have been very apparent much quicker that was the problem. So number 4, making a major change without knowing how it impacts the budget. Here's my horror story number 2. There was a library that their financial oversight of the board at that time was largely a report on how much money was in the checking account. And they thought there was lots of money in the checking account. They wanted to be open more hours. I can't remember what else went into it. It may have also been giving raises, but it was definitely more staffing. And they made that change, and lo and behold, by the end of the year, they began to run out of money, as they hadn't really understood how it impacted the budget in the long run. They just knew at that moment they made it, there was plenty of money in the checking account. Number 3 is not knowing what legal limit, if any, there is on your tax levy. This one could conceivably even be number 1, but there are reasons for the things that I have as number 1 and 2. But you do need to know the legal limit. Some of you have a legal limit, some of you do not. I'm guessing it's right about half and half, and we're actually going to be spending a fair amount of time talking about that question and what budget law is in just a very little bit here. Number 2, not exercising authority over your budget. and deferring all budget decisions to the city or the county or the township. So horror story number 3, I guess. We had a city once that told the library board they were not to pay mileage to the librarian to attend any system meetings or anywhere else. And further, it was the practice then at that time for the board to come to the city council for approval of salary increases for the librarian. The library board has full authority over their budget. They can make the decisions on how you're going to spend the money. None of those things have to go to the city. The only thing that has to go to the city is the overall levy for the library. And the number 1 budget mistake, luckily, I don't think it happens much anymore, is not developing a budget at all. This used to be quite common. You just didn't have a budget as such, not certainly something that lays out your anticipated revenues and expenditures for the whole year by line item. And you really need to have that in order to effectively manage the library's money. Since we started requiring, which has been a long time now, as most of you know, or not exactly requiring, but since you got credit for showing that you had a budget in your allocation, this one has gotten much better. But sometimes I do wonder if they've just made up something for the purpose of the allocation worksheet and aren't really developing a true budget that they use. Okay. I want to go on to some key concepts in library finance and budgeting. Maybe before I do that, I ought to stop and ask, were there any questions? You can type them in chat or unmute now. Okay, I'm guessing not. So let's go into some of these key concepts. And again, some of these things we'll go into more detail about a little later. First off, a library of a municipality has a library fund. In a district library, everything is library money, and so you have a general fund and possibly an employee benefits fund. But cities, counties, and townships that maintain a library should have a library fund. What comes into the fund has to be passed on to the library, and it should be done promptly. There's no reason really to delay it. And that money in the library fund cannot be diverted to other municipal uses. So if your city decides, we really need to replace a police car, and we're only going to have money to do that if we dip into what's in the library fund, that's not allowed. The library fund has to go to the library. It's frankly just illegal to use it for any other purposes. Library boards set budgets. It is not the city that sets your budget. It is the library board, but there may, and I say may, be a mill levy limit set by the city using home rule. I'm guessing just off the top of my head, and we haven't really collected information on this purposely, but just from what I know, working with libraries, probably about half of our libraries do have a mill levy limit that has been set by the city, maybe set at 5 mills or 6 or whatever, but the other half do not. And here is the basis for this. This is a quote from the law. There's the citation for the law underneath it. The governing body, and by that we're talking city council or commission, county commission, or township board, shall annually levy a tax for the maintenance of such library in such sum as the library board shall determine within the limitations fixed by law. That's pretty plain language. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand that. In such sum as the library board shall determine. You do not have to know what within limitations fixed by law means, but let me deal with just the basic portion of this here. Not only is it simple, but the Attorney General has a number of times had to issue an opinion to a city or or some other unit of government which doesn't quite believe that this is true in Kansas law. I'm just going to read short portions from several of those to emphasize the point. From 1972, your understanding is correct that the city governing body must levy a tax to fund the budget prepared by the library board, so far as the levy is within the limitations provided. The library board prepares a budget which is conclusive upon the governing body of the city, so long as the levy required to fund it falls within the limitations prescribed. From 1974, the levy made by the city governing body in behalf of the library must be in such sum as the library board determines within the limitations fixed by law, and the city governing body has no power to alter or modify that levy. And from, I believe this is 1983, we have no hesitancy in concluding that the amount of money to be raised through the imposition of a property tax to maintain the library established under the provisions, and it gives a law citation here, is to be determined by the board of directors of the library, not the governing body of the municipality. Although the sum requested cannot result in a mill levy in excess of that allowed by law, the governing body of the city may not reduce the amount requested by the library board. So given that clear, excuse me here, I need to silence my phone. Okay, you may want, given that it's so clear and the Attorney General has stated it, restated it clearly so many times, it's amazing how often this does come up, but it does. So now that you know the library board's authority and that the tax should be in sum as the library board shall determine, let's deal with the part about the limitations fixed by law. The limitations fixed by law are basically charter ordinances, or in the case of counties, charter resolutions that set a mill levy cap. At the time this law was written, there was an actual limitation in the law in mills, but all those, not just for libraries, but for every unit, the various limitations in the law for different levies were all removed in 1999. And actually they'd been suspended for 10 years before that. So this goes back quite a long time. However, cities can use home rule to pass a charter ordinance which sets a mill levy cap at 5 mills or whatever it may be. And the library is bound by that limitation. I will say township boards do not have home rule authority. So if you're a township library, there's definitely not a cap on what the township is required to levy for you. Cities or counties may have one. District libraries, there's no cap, there's no governing authority to put a cap on them. They're their own governing authority. Now, given this pretty strong statement of library board authority over the budget, I have to not digress, but take a little look at something. Senate Bill 13.
Roger, we have a question.
Sure, yeah.
From Independence, sorry to interrupt. If a mill levy cap has been set since 1999, is it effective?
Yes. The Attorney General did opine that any already existing levy limitation was still in effect at that time, as well as, of course, anything set since then. Were there other questions?
No, nothing yet.
Okay.
No.
So let's take a look at Senate Bill 13, which just recently was signed into law by the governor. So it is something we're having to deal with. which may undercut this. That's not the purpose of Senate Bill 13, but it may have that effect. And it changes some of the things we have come to expect in the budgeting process in the state. So Senate Bill 13, as I said, it was passed and signed into law. It establishes what's called a revenue neutral rate, which is to be given to taxing entities by the county clerk. Basically what it means is the same dollars from year to year, no increase. You can exceed that. There's nothing preventing you from passing a budget that is above the revenue neutral rate, but there are requirements when that happens. So to exceed the revenue neutral rate, that is to get even a single dollar more, and this probably only, it's not clear yet, but it probably only applies to the ad valorem portion of your tax revenue, that is the property tax. You have to give notification to the county clerk by July 20th each year. It's not clear in the case of municipal libraries, but it probably has to be the city that's giving this notification to the county clerk, not the library directly, since the library doesn't levy a tax. In the case of district libraries, if you're going to go up this year, by July 20th, you're going to need to notify your county clerk of that fact. I don't know yet if there'll be a form to do that, or if you just pick up the phone and call her or him. But anyway, there does have to be a notification. Then the next step, and this begins next year, not this year, because the county clerks threw such a fit about it, and rightly so, because it's quite a mess for them, and they don't have the software to deal with it. They're basically being given a year to
Roger, we
implement.
have another question.
Oh, sure.
Okay, if a city has a cap on the mill levy, and that makes your money received go down, does that keep you from receiving your system funding?
Probably not. If what the eligibility or the maintenance of effort requirement is for state aid, and thus for the system grant, is that that the same number of dollars be levied, or if the dollars fall, the same mill levy be imposed. So as long as the mill levy doesn't drop, you still maintain your eligibility. But if the mill levy is cut and the dollars drop, then yes, you're not eligible unless extra steps are taken, like the city agrees to give you additional money. All right. The next step on exceeding the revenue neutral rate, which begins next year, is that the county clerk has to notify each taxpayer of that difference, and that can be done by email, but they usually don't have emails for most of the taxpayers, or it can be done by mail, and that is going to be a very heavy burden on the county clerks. I don't know if they'll be able to accomplish that without additional staff or not. And there's cost in postage and printing. That cost is to be borne by the state for the first 2 years. But after that, the plan is the cost will be sent back to the taxing entity to pay that amount. Senate Bill 13 also makes a change in the budget schedule. Now budget hearings have to be held by August 25th, I believe, and there's no beginning date. Right now, Senate Bill 13 says its hearings have to be held no earlier than August 10th and no later than September 10th. And they've apparently decided that's not enough time for the county clerks eventually. So it's rare that you have a bill passed and then in the same session have another bill amending that bill. But there is a House Bill 2104, which is currently in the works, which would amend Senate Bill 13 in the same session, which would set that time frame back to August 20th to September 20th. The budget hearing can be no earlier than August 20th and no later than September 20th. So those are things that particularly district libraries need to be aware of. How do those affect municipal libraries? That's going to be an open question. The impact could be a bad one. The main question is, will a city that wants to maintain a revenue neutral budget be able to override the requirements of KSA 12-1220? That's the law we read a minute ago about the levy needs to be in such sum as the library board determines. So if the library board submits a budget that calls for an increase, but the rest of the city budget is maintaining the revenue neutral amount, does that trigger the requirements? Can the city turn down that, even if what the library board presents is within the 6 mil cap or whatever that cap happens to be? Are they able to turn that down? That's going to be the big question to be sorted out over the next year or so. I don't have an answer for it, unfortunately. All right, any questions on Senate Bill 13?
I don't see any.
All right, continuing on with our key concepts, it's important to budget to a plan, not plan to a budget. So in other words, you figure out what your library wants to do. What are your goals? How are you going to change services? What's it going to cost to do that? And you put that in your budget. You shouldn't be saying, well, we only have this number of dollars, so we can't do this or we can't do that. Go ahead and plan for it and put it in your budget. Now there is reality. I fully understand that. This may seem a little pie in the sky. You're not always going to be able to develop a budget sufficient to do what you would like to do in the plan. So that's something you have to work out. But it's still important to key your budget to what your plan is. And a budget is needed as a spending guide. I mean, it is telling you how much you can spend on books, how much you can spend on equipment. Some other things you won't have choices about, like you may budget something for utilities, and if your utility bills run higher, you don't have any choice but to pay that. But it is your spending guide that should guide you in what you're doing. Some of the things that boards and librarians need to be aware of are your sources of revenue. This is all part of a budget. What your anticipated revenues are, that is the amount you expect to receive this year, your anticipated expenditures for the year, and how the library is currently doing compared to that budget. And financial reports are an essential tool for doing that. They should compare the actual revenues and expenditures to what you have in the budget. There's just no way to effectively manage where you're going without having that sort of financial report. There is a portion of the state standards for public libraries which talks about the allocation of library budgets. These call for a minimum of 65% to be spent on personnel. And so that would be both salaries and employee benefits like Social Security payments, and then health insurance if you offer health insurance, capers if you're a member of capers, etc. That is the employer's share of capers. And then a minimum of 12% go for resources without stating what kind of resources those should be. So there are a wide range of things. There are books, there are AV or non-print materials, and there's digital now. About 12% or more of your budget should go into those things. And then the rest is everything else, basically. You know that mill levies are how taxes are raised, and the amount of the mill levy is determined by two things. It's the amount of money to be raised and the assessed valuation of the city or whatever other taxing district you may have. But just keep in mind, mill levies can't exceed whatever local cap may exist. So if you're in a city that has a cap, it needs to be it can't float to whatever, the mill levy can't float to whatever level is needed to raise the amount of money in the library budget. It will stop it at the cap. But overall mill levies, the amount is calculated based on the amount of money to be raised and the assessed valuation of the city. Talking a little more than I did earlier about director and librarian roles. Library directors are involved in budget development. The amount of the involvement will depend on local practices. I would guess in most cases, I mean, and I know it's true here for both the system and the library board. I pretty much fully develop the budget and take it to the boards. I do ask ahead of doing that, usually if there is any input that board members have before the budget is being developed, but I bring a budget to them for their discussion and adoption or amendment and adoption. Once the budget is adopted, the library director's role is to administer the budget approved by the board. That is, it does fall back on the library director to decide, yes, we can afford to buy more books this month. No, we can't, and to go ahead and, make arrangements for the new computer that needs to be ordered or whatever it happens to be. So library boards also are involved in budget development. Again, that depends on local practices. There are a few libraries, and I'm not even sure we have any in Southeast Kansas at all, where there's a budget or a finance committee of the library board that meets with the librarian, and they work through developing the budget. In a few very small libraries, especially if there's a brand new librarian, it may be the board that develops the budget, or the treasurer even as an individual develops the budget in its entirety. But at any rate, however that budget is developed, it does need to come to the library board for approval. Okay, before I go into revenue sources, are there any questions over anything we've covered up to this point?
I don't see any in chat.
Okay, this is a quiet bunch today. I think it tends to be a little quieter on Zoom than doing it in person in my experience. So. All right, let's take a look at revenue sources. The basic funding of the budget for just about every public library are city or other municipality taxes, city, county, township, or your library district taxes. This actually has more than one component. You may only get a check from the city or the county, a total dollar amount, and you may not be given a breakdown or bother to look at that to know there is a breakdown. But you're not only getting property tax, or as it's called, the ad valorem tax, but that is the biggest part of it. So there's the property or ad valorem tax levy for the library fund. In addition to that, there are motor vehicle and some other similar taxes that are split in proportion to the levy of that fund. Talk more about that a little later. But basically it means, if your city gets X number of dollars in motor vehicle taxes passed on, and the library levy is 10% of the total mill levy, then the library gets 10% of those motor vehicle taxes as well. It is proportional. Occasionally, it's supplemented by other city funds. I know there are cities where there are payments out of the city general fund, others where there are payments out of a utility or revenue, or can't think of the right term now, but anyway, basically a utility fund. If they run their own utilities, some funds from that can be transferred. But those are not real common, but they're also not extremely uncommon. you can find your municipality's budget online at this website, or if you just Google Kansas municipal budgets, it will take you here. And later on, I'll show a picture taken from one municipality's budget to point out some particular parts of that. These budgets are online after they're submitted to the state by the county clerk. So it's after the taxes are levied in the fall. And you just have to, I mean, it's obviously too late to do anything about it then, but if you want to know and you haven't got a copy of the library portion of your municipality's budget from the city clerk or the city administrator, you can go online eventually and find it. Usually December, January is when those are put up there. So you can just keep checking back until you find your cities or county, whatever. Okay, other revenue sources other than the local tax income. State aid. All public libraries in Kansas do qualify to get state aid. The amount has dropped very dramatically over almost 20 years, but especially over the last 12 years. The last few years have been fairly stable. State aid is given on a strict per capita basis. So whatever money is budgeted by the legislature for state aid, the state library just does an arithmetic calculation and finds out how much proportion of that is yours. As stated earlier, you do have to maintain eligibility for this by maintenance of effort, and that's to show that the city is or county, township, or district is levying just as much in dollars for the library in this budget year as they did in the last. But as I also said, if the amount drops because the assessed valuation went down, but the mill levy stays just as high, you still qualify. Then there is a system grant, and eligibility for this is based on the same eligibility as for state, the maintenance of effort thing. I will say the state library has begun at least saying, and I think actually doing, not giving state aid if you don't complete your state report, your state statistical survey. We don't look at that. We only continue to look at the maintenance of effort component of that. And public libraries, except for some district libraries, receive the system grant. In our system, that is determined by the amount of valuation of that assessed valuation in that district. I think maybe it's 25 million. Those districts with an assessed valuation of over 25 million don't receive the system grant. And those under that do receive some system grant. But there are other revenue sources. Those were the three that are common to all libraries. There may be fines, fees, etc. And by fees, it could be photocopier fees, computer printer fees, something else. Then there's fundraising, of course. Then there are memorials, donations, bequests, sometimes endowments or foundations.
Roger, we have another question.
Okay.
Come from Independence. Our city discovered a mill levy cap that we have exceeded. So we are dropping by 50,000 K in budget.
Okay.
Will that will that still get state aid next year? Will we still get state aid next year?
I don't think so. I can't think of the exception that would make that. I think it would be good if you know that's happening to call up and talk to the state library about the situation and see what advice they can give. The state librarian does have the ability in the law to waive that requirement, but it also states when when the state librarian determines that the intent of the law is being met. So the intent of the law is that you continue funding the library at least the same level. And I don't see how that could be the case in the case of in a situation like this. So I think it would be good to take the step now and talk to the state library about this. All right. Any questions on the sources of revenue? All right, well, let's go on to the planning and budget cycle. So here is the cycle for public libraries in January or March. That is the time to review plans and what income is needed to achieve those plans. This is also the time for, if you're a librarian, checking with your boards to see what they would like to see different in the coming year, anything that may affect what the budget is going to be. Depending on your local budget practices, I mean your city's budget practices, you would present the written budget request to the city. This, of course, is not a step that applies to district libraries, but it applies to other libraries. Then in August and September now, I used to just say August, but now it's going to go into September. The city publishes the budget and conducts a public hearing. In the case of district libraries, you publish your own budget. But in the case of city, county, or township libraries, you go to your city, county, and township, and the library budget is published as part of the overall city budget.
We have another question.
Uh-huh.
Where do the system grants actually come from? Is that money given from the state for various systems to administer?
No, systems are funded by our own property tax. There's a kind of a basic deal that was undertaken when systems were established that there was a nationwide push at that time to make sure everyone had access to library service. And the way that was accomplished in Kansas is through regional library systems, where the system levies a tax on property that's not already in a city where there's a local public library, uses that money to help improve the library services in the libraries within that region through the form of grants and services. And in return for that, the library is obligated to serve all those rural residents who pay the property tax that support the system. So basically the shorter answer is the system has its own property tax, and that's where our money comes from. We also get from some state aid, but we don't pay our grants out of state aid.
We have another question. Are donations part of the budget or kept separate and not counted in the budget?
It can go either way. Yeah, it can certainly go either way. I would not put in budgets or donations that may be one-time things. If you're having a pattern of X number of dollars coming in per year for donations, you can maybe go ahead and rely on that and put that in your budget, estimate what that would be and develop a budget based on that. But I think in most cases, I would keep that off budget. Any other questions there?
I don't see any.
Okay. So after the budget is published, and by publish, I mean there's a notice in the newspaper. And actually, this is something I didn't mention under Senate Bill 13.
We did get one real quick.
Okay, just let me finish this.
Okay, sorry.
For those of you who are district libraries, you need to be aware that the budget publication under Senate Bill 13 is not going to now just be in the newspaper, but also needs to be on your website. So just keep that in mind as too. And then the last step in the budget cycle is in November, December, towards the end of the year, you determine your final operating budget. You may have changed your mind about something between May and December. You may have a better idea of how much money to expect. And so, you can recalibrate your budget, usually not too much, but just a little bit to take those factors into account, and then use that final operating budget for your financial reports the next year. Okay, what was the question?
So if we spend the donations, does that affect our bottom line expense cap?
Is this a district library?
This is Independence is asking.
Yeah, they're a district library, but not operating under the district law. I'm not sure if that's different for Independence or not. I would say for municipal libraries, it does not. For district libraries, it probably does. Well, no, if you keep it totally off budget, I would say it doesn't. You can still have separate memorial funds or whatever, and not include that in your operating budget. Truthfully, I'm not sure in the case of Independence. You have, as you know, your own rather unique statute, and I'm not sure how that plays into it. I would guess it does not go against that. I mean, especially it would be if you keep it in a completely separate bank account and never goes into your your budget that you look at month to month. I wouldn't think so, no. Any other questions?
See any?
All right, so what are the steps in preparing a budget? First, you consider what you hope to accomplish. So this goes back to your plan. What is it you want to do? How much is it going to cost? How much financial resources, or I don't know why I just didn't say money there. How much money is it going to be necessary to achieve that? Then you prepare a draft budget based on that. You take that budget to the library board. It's approved by the library board. They can certainly amend that when you take it to them. And it requires a vote of the board to approve the budget. And then the board submits the budget to the municipality to levy the taxes. In the case of district libraries, at this point, it would just, or at the appropriate time in the budget timeline, it would go directly to the county to levy taxes. Okay, so I went in and grabbed a snip from some budgets that were online. This is not even a city that's in southeast Kansas, but I did X out the name of it. One of the things that's in the state budget forms is the notice of the budget hearing, which is what this is. And before these were available online, we used to require you to make a copy of this notice of budget hearing and send it to us as part of the budget requirement for your allocation. We no longer do that because if we want to see it, we can find it online. So I've highlighted there. You can see the main point I want to make on this is the fact that there are 3 different funds in this city. 2 of them having mill levies, the other does not. The general fund, a debt service fund, and a library fund. It used to be a lot of cities would have funds that went on forever. They might list 11 or 12 different funds with and most of them with tax levies. Since the limitations on the individual funds have been removed and that flexibility is given to the city, most cities have collapsed all those separate funds into just a general fund. They like to do that because it's simpler, it gives you more flexibility. When there's a fund for a particular purpose, you can only legally spend the money for that fund for that purpose. Whereas if it's in the general fund, it could be any municipal service. But the law does specifically require a library fund. Once in a while, you'll find a city which wants to collapse everything, including the library fund, into the general fund. That's something to be resisted because once it's in the general fund, you're not guaranteed that money. At that point, it would be able for them to decide to divert the money to buy a police car instead. But most don't do that. There's even an Attorney General opinion on this subject that yes, you do have to, according to the law, maintain a separate library fund if you have a library. So this fund, library fund, it will tell you, what your budget authority is going to be, how much ad valorem tax it's going to take to do that, and what the estimated tax rate is going to be. And it also shows you that information for previous years. And here is within the same city's budget, their library fund. I don't know if you can see, if you see my cursor or not, but I'm circling where it says library. This is the library fund. The main thing I wanted to show you this for is to look down under expenditures. They just have one expenditure listed, appropriation to board. That means the appropriation to the library board of $59,406. So most cities, this is what they will do. All they will put in under expenditures is the appropriation to the board, and this 59,406 becomes the city's legal cap on sending money to the library. Once the money is in your hands, there's not any legal cap showing here that affects the library. District libraries are different. Whatever is published in your budget, because you're your own municipality, that becomes an actual budget cap that you can't legally exceed. I will point out, since I have it here too, I don't have the whole page because it wasn't going to show up, and I'm kind of wishing now maybe I included the bottom of the page, but I didn't. But it shows up here all those other taxes I was referring to. So you can see this city expects the library fund's proportion of the motor vehicle tax to be $8,757, recreational vehicle tax 161, 16 and 20 ton vehicle tax 66, and commercial vehicle tax 292, watercraft tax 52. Usually I just refer to these shorthand as saying motor vehicle taxes or motor vehicle and similar taxes, but those are all taxes that get divided among the municipalities, and as I said earlier, you get your proportional share of those. So that offsets the 59,406 that's appropriated to the library board. That 9,328 that comes from all those taxes is used first, and then after that, the amount remaining is what's used to calculate the mill levy to raise the rest of the money. Any questions on this budget form? Okay, let's go on to understand a little bit better about just how the money comes to you. Let's do this, follow the money from taxpayer to the library board treasurer. So when the taxpayer pays their taxes in December, or in December and May, if they split it in two, as most people do, or at other times if they're delinquent, they pay that to the county treasurer. And the county treasurer, of course, collects the tax for all taxing districts in that county. Cities, school districts, extension districts, library districts, whatever there may be a levy for. It's all collected by the county treasurer. And the county treasurer then goes ahead and distributes the income to all taxing units. So here's a very simplified example that wouldn't stand up very well in real life, but it's enough to understand the concept. So over here, we see that the county treasurer has collected $200,000 in taxes in your city. And we're going to say in your city, the only taxing entities are the school district, the county, and the city. There may be others, but for this purposes, we're going to say they're only the same. So that 200,000 gets split proportionally. The school district with 32 mills gets 64,000. The county with 38 mills gets 76,000, and the city with 30 mills gets $60,000 of that. So then the county treasurer, after calculating that, sends a check to the city clerk for the city's $60,000. When the city clerk or city treasurer probably, I'm not always clear on whether it's clerks or treasurers who do things in cities. But anyway, I really think it probably is the clerk in this case. But the city taxes, they're identified by fund. That is, the county actually doesn't just show 60,000. They show X $1,000 for the general fund, X $1,000 for the library fund. If there are other funds, they're included in there. So let's say the city that got the $60,000 has a general fund of 30 mils, a library fund of 5 mils, and a bond and interest fund of 5 mils. So that $60,000, 45,000 of that goes to the city's general fund. 7,500 of that goes to the library fund, and 7,500 to the bond and interest fund. And then the city clerk at that point writes a check for the city's, let's see, 7,500 that goes to the library and sends it on to the library. And this should be, I mean, from taxpayer to county treasurer, there are certain distribution dates, so there could be a lag there. But on that distribution date, it ought to go to the city clerk in a timely manner, and then the city clerk ought to pass it along to the library in a timely manner. There's not really any excuse for a long delay. And here's the tax revenue disbursement schedule that's set in the law. January, March, June, September, and October. And then in December for motor vehicle tax only is their required disbursement of that. And the law says to be distributed to the taxing entities on or before these dates. So, you know, it's March 20th now. I mean, March 20th was the date of that the city should have gotten the last tax disbursement from the county. It's now April 20th. It's been a full month. You should have received your money by now. You should have received it quite a bit before now. So if you aren't doing that, haven't received it, check with your city clerk and say, okay, why hasn't this money come?
We have another question.
All right.
It says, I might have missed this, but how are mills determined? If the library is capped at 5 mills, why is that? Is it determined by local or state statute?
Yeah, if there's a cap in place anymore, it's strictly because there's been a charter ordinance using home rule that has set a mill levy cap. Your city has used a charter ordinance. That's not just a simple ordinance. That's not just passing a resolution. They have to go through the charter ordinance process and set a cap. There's no state cap anymore. It hasn't been since 99 or 89, depending on how you look at it. All right, any other questions on this section on, you know, following the money from taxpayer to the library?
I did have one more question.
All right.
Is the charter ordinance process difficult?
It is not difficult, but there is more to it than just, you know, passing a resolution. It requires a 2/3 vote for one thing. And then it requires being published as an official legal notice in the newspaper for 2 consecutive weeks. And then there's a 60-day waiting period before it goes into effect. And during the waiting period, if it's a charter ordinance that you don't like, you can circulate a petition against it, or anyone can. And if you get enough signatures on that petition and turn it in, and they're, you know, those signatures are verified, then the charter ordinance doesn't go into effect. Unless, if they still want it to go into effect, they can submit it to a special election or the next regular election if there's going to be one in a timely way. But there is a limit. I think it says the election has to take place within, don't quote me on this, I didn't look this up recently, but it's something like within 90 days or something like that of the time the petition was submitted. And if it doesn't, then the charter ordinance is dead. So there are multiple steps, but, you know, they also happen all the time. So it's not quite right to say it's difficult, but it's also not as simple as just deciding we're going to only levy this much for the library. I should say, although this is a budgeting workshop, that home rule process is the very same thing that is used to change what the law says about number of people or residency requirements for the library board, and that's happened quite a bit too. We'll talk more about charter ordinances if you come to the Keeping It Legal workshop here in a couple of weeks. Okay, there are some other relevant laws to budgeting. First off, this citation in the law says that the treasurer of the library board has to be bonded, and it also says that the municipality pays the funds that are received for the library over to the board treasurer. There's also
Roger,
the cash
excuse me.
basis law. In Kansas, we have a cash basis law. I've had it since the Great Depression, that at its core says you can't spend money you don't have on hand.
Roger, Sedan wanted to ask a question.
All right.
Is it-
Sorry to
Agent-
interrupt.
No, that's
Yes,
good.
I was just wondering, not having financial lingo down, what does it mean to be bonded? The treasurer must be
Oh,
bonded.
a bond is sort of like an insurance. You pay a premium to, sometimes it's usually an insurance company, but there are different companies that provide bonds. And it's a guarantee. If there's some financial misfeasance, then the bond will cover, sort of like insurance covers a loss, will cover your loss up to the amount of the bond.
So the library pays for the treasurer
Yes.
to be bonded.
That's right. Yeah, the
Okay.
treasurer doesn't pay for it, him or herself. The library pays for that. I will also say that the law allows the city to require a certain amount of bond. I mean, to set the amount. I don't think many cities do that. Most libraries determine for themselves what the amount of the bond should be. But the city does have the authority to impose an amount.
Thank you.
Mhm. At its core, well, I've already talked about the cash basis law a little bit. The practical upshot to this is you can't make expenditures on anticipated income. You can't borrow money to cover expenses. You've got to have money already on hand. There are certain exceptions to the cash basis law, the biggest two of which are bonds. If you have, say, bonds to build a library, you get the money, you can borrow money for that. I mean, bonding is borrowing. This type of bond, separate from the treasurer's bond, this type of bond is essence borrowing money that you pay back. Then there are the possibility for lease purchase agreements as well. But other than that, the cash basis law pertains to libraries just like it does to anyone else. The law also allows a capital improvement fund for the library into which you can move up to 10% of your revenues. And this is always interpreted as being of your tax revenues. You can also put any amount in the capital improvement fund from such sources as fundraising or donations, anything like that. Fines and fees could all go into the capital improvement fund. And the capital improvement fund then can accumulate from year to year, and you use that for major expenses, especially building expenses, but for major equipment purchases that could also be used for that. We need to say something about how you can legally invest public funds. First, we're going to talk about our tax funds or any funds that come to the library other than donations. This is not specific, just like the cash basis law wasn't specifically about libraries, but does apply to libraries. So the investment requirements are for all local units of government in Kansas and not just for libraries. So when you have funds, you can invest them in savings accounts, in CDs and similar things, but there is a local branch requirement. It has to be an institution with a branch in your county. Now, if you can't from your local bank receive a rate for what you invest that's equal to what US government securities are paying, you have several additional options. Oops, sorry about that. You can buy treasury bills. You can put it into a municipal investment pool that's maintained by the state treasurer of Kansas. Or you can put it into municipal bonds that are issued in Kansas. But you can't just like take tax funds and take out a mutual fund or something along those lines. These are how you can invest that money. However, donations are different, and this is something that is particular to libraries because it comes from this law that you see the citation for there, which is actually found within the law that lists library board powers and duties. And this law allows pretty much any type of investment for funds that you receive as gifts. And it specifically talks about investing and reinvesting proceeds from dividends, from rent, and from other income. So when you receive donations, this could be a bequest, it could be just money donated to the library. It could be property given to the library. You can hold that property as it is, or you can sell it and invest it in income producing sources of whatever the library board chooses. Once in a while, when there's an audit, there is an auditor who is not aware that it's legal to use library funds in this way if they are donations, and they will try to say you can't do that, but you can if you ever run into that. Just look for this law or call us here and we can give you the citation. So. All right. Mill levies are maybe the most intimidating thing to understand. They're not all that difficult though. And if you don't want to know about mill levies, you can just tune out for a little bit. But I think understanding something about mill levies and how they work will help understand the library situation a little better and just where you stand. So let's take a look at that. First, understanding what a mill is. A mill is $1 per $1,000 of assessed valuation, or it's 0.001, 1/1000. So let's say you have an assessed valuation in your city of $4,450,000. At $1 per $1,000 of assessed valuation, 1 mill will raise $4,450. It's 1,000th, so you can just move the decimal point 3 places to the left, and you know how much a mill raises based on your assessed valuation. So the next one, I usually, when we have in-person ones, I at this point have people tell me what the next amount's going to be, but I think it'll work easier. So the next one, if I just go ahead, so the next one on the 19 million assessed valuation, that in that city, 1 mill raises 19,232.
Roger, do you have a question?
72 million one, it raises 72,426. Yes.
Okay, if capital improvements are in CDs, how do they account for interest? Is it considered in the general fund and part of the max output in cap IMP? I'm not sure IMP.
I'm not sure exactly what's meant by that last part, but I think I understand the question. Any money, any interest that's raised in a CD or other investment stays with that particular fund or investment. It doesn't go back to the general fund. Did that answer the question?
Yes. Yes, they said yes.
So I mentioned earlier that to know what a mill levy is going to be, it's computed by using the amount of money to be raised and the assessed valuation of the city. This is the formula. It's the amount of tax to be levied. It's divided by the assessed valuation, and then take that times 1,000. And that's how you determine mills. So what a mill means to a homeowner is shown here. Different property is assessed at different percentages. So commercial property is assessed at 30%, I believe, but residential property is assessed at 11.5% of fair market value. So if you have a $90,000 home, 11.5% of that, or 0.115, is $10,350 is your assessed valuation of that house. Take that 10,350 assessed value times 1 mil. And so 1 mil on a $90,000 home raises about $10.35, or a tax of $10.35 to the homeowner. And this part, will be the same from community to community. If you just, it'll always be the 11.5%. So you just take what the value of the property is, the fair market value, and you can determine what what 1 mil will mean as a tax to that taxpayer. So if you have your calculator nearby, or a phone with a calculator on it, I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to figure out, in this city, the amount of the tax to be raised for the library is $99,650. The assessed valuation of the city is $20,717,530. So if you divide the 99,000 by the 20 million, that will give you the mill levy. You will have to move the decimal point 3 places, in this case to the right, because you're taking by 1,000 to see what the mill is going to be. I'll give you a few minutes. I won't ask you to chime in, but see if you can come up with this mill levy, or not a few minutes. I'll give you just a very short amount of time, actually. And if you've done it, the mill levy is 4.810. It's actually 4.8099, but when mills are levied, they're rounded to the nearest 1,000, or 3 points after the decimal. So a library raising $99,650 in ad valorem tax in a city with an assessed valuation, or a district with an assessed valuation of 20.7 million, that requires a 4.81 mill levy to raise that amount of money. And you can use this, if you're thinking of budgets at different levels and want to see what that would result in a mill levy, you can find your assessed valuation in your city's budget forms online. Granted, it'll be a year old, but it'll be close. You can divide the amount of tax you're thinking about. And remember, this is only the ad valorem portion of it, not all the motor vehicle and everything. So that complicates it a little bit. And divide the amount to be raised by the assessed valuation. And you can figure out, okay, if we have a budget of this amount, that's going to be a mill levy of about this. So you can know before you ever submit your budget. All right, I've mentioned financial reports at a couple times during this. I want to talk a little more now about what I mean about the kind of information you really ought to have in order to manage the budget well. First off, financial reports are an essential tool for boards and library directors. If you don't have a financial report, you just can't give appropriate oversight to how you're doing financially. So this is the kind of information that should be on a report. It should show you what's received and spent in this month, because we're usually talking about a monthly report. It should also show you for the whole year to date what you've received and what you've spent. And this is by line item. And then it should do a comparison of your actual receipts and actual expenses to what the budget is. For a quality report, it obviously has to be accurate information, but it also has to be timely or up-to-date information. And it needs to be understandable. You know, I have seen finance. My church, for instance, uses a software that is offered specifically for our denomination. That is a nightmare to try to delve into and just really understand. To be really effective in giving the appropriate oversight, it needs to be understandable to your library board members and to you or to the librarian. And that should be both in the format that it's in and the language that it uses. So this is one format that I'm trying. I need to get rid of something here because part of it's covering up what I'm seeing. This is one format. This is actually how I have both our local library and our system financial reports prepared. So for each, I mean, it's a somewhat simplified. There are a lot less line items than there are in reality, but for their revenues are above, the expenditures are below. You can see that for fines and fees, 71 was collected this month. Year to date, it's been $742 collected. The budget is $1,800, and so we've collected 41% so far this year of what we expect to collect. So are we on track? Well, are we less than halfway through the year? Then we're probably on track. But if this is a financial report that comes in, you know, September, let's say, you may look at that and say, oh, we're not going to have as much revenue as we thought, at least in the fines and fees area. And then you can see that for each line I've listed here: state aid, system grant, and tax income. Tax income is kind of front loaded in the year. So, you know, in this case, it's 84% received, while other things, most other things are less. On state aid, you can see the state aid has arrived, and it wasn't quite as much as expected, but it was only $14 off. Then under expenditures, the same way. Okay, we've spent so far this year $2,619 out of our $5,100 budget on books and other materials. So that's 51% spent. Are we at June? Well, if this is June, then we're about on track. If it's May or April, we may be spending it too fast a clip and have to reduce the book buying in the rest of the year. Or if it's in September, you know, we can step up and put in a big order. And it's not just, you know, by month. One reason I don't like budgets that are cut up into, you know, what we should do this month. Like if you divided the $5,100 in 12 parts, and each month you compare where you should be at this year, that doesn't hold true for most line items. You know, in our case, we have for Iola Public Library, for instance, we have a big order that we always pay in January because we pay all our magazine renewals at once, or almost all of them, to a company called Revistas. So we spend a big chunk in January. So if you were just looking at that alone, you'd say, oh man, we're really floundering. We're really going over budget. But no, that's where you expect to be. Given that, you gotta have to understand your situation and know that, you know, you're not going to have that big expenditure every month. Some other things are very seasonal too. You know, your insurance, that only is paid once a year. You know, is it early in the year? Is it late in the year? To know if you're ahead or behind, etc. So I think this is fairly simple. I think it's easy to understand for people, and it shows you everything you really need to know to monitor the budget well. Here is a different way to do it. It's just slightly different. Everything is the same except as a percentage in the last column, it shows the remaining. So you say, whoop, you can show that under the $1,800 budget, what you expect to get from fines and fees, we've received 742 this year. That means we're still under budget, expecting to get 1,058. You could put in both remaining amount and the percentage. I'm fine with just percentage, but I know some people like to see remaining, especially when you get down to expenditures more so than revenues. Okay, we still have $2,481 in books and materials we can spend this year. So that tells me about how much I can spend per month.
And is this just done on Excel, an Excel spreadsheet?
It can be. I mean, this is. I just did it. Lots of places are using QuickBooks now. We actually use Excel here for the Iola library report. Our system report is actually handled by an accountant. But yeah, it can be done in Excel, or it can be done in QuickBooks, or whatever accounting type or bookkeeping type software you want to use. Any other questions about financial reports? So if you have something like this and you give it to your board every month, that gives them the tool that they need to see how things are going and see how we're doing. And then a word about audits. Audits are required in Kansas for municipalities that have a budget of over $500,000 a year. And I think this is based on revenues. It used to be at the $275,000 level. It was changed a few years ago to 500, but then they put in something for those between 275,000 and 500,000 that you either have to have an audit or have to have agreed upon procedures required. And that just doesn't mean that you go out to a bookkeeper and say, let's agree on what the procedures are going to be, and you prepare a report for us. There's actually a whole definition of agreed upon procedures in the Kansas Municipal Accounting and Audit Guide that have to be followed, which aren't all that different from what's in the audit. And when I priced it, it wasn't all that different from the cost of the audit either. But just know, if you're over $275,000 a year, you're required to have something done, either agreed upon procedures or an audit. And if you're over 500,000, then the audit is required. So what about those that are under $275,000 a year, as most of you will be? While there's not any requirement, it's just good practice and helps protect you to have an audit or something similar to it done. You may not have, since you're not required to do an audit, you don't have to follow everything that's in the Kansas Municipal Audit Accounting and Audit Guide. Instead, you can just go to a bookkeeper and say, would you check over our books, and give us a report on it. And they can do that and report back. And that's something we highly recommend to libraries with less than $275,000 revenue annually. But it's not legally required. I guess I didn't mention the audits now must usually be done independently of the city audit. Until a few years ago, lots of times city audit would include the library, and that was very convenient. And in most cases, the library didn't have to pay for it, or if they did, it was just a small percentage of the total city audit cost. It wasn't too bad. But they changed the accounting rules several years ago, and now they're basically saying libraries should be audited independently from the city audit, and so you have to pay for it.
We do have a question.
right.
Where do you find the municipal accounting and audit guidelines? I guess guides.
Now that's a little bit of a sore point. You have to buy it. It's something that's incorporated in state law as a requirement, and yet it's kind of proprietary. And to have access to it, you have to buy it, or you have to use it from someone who has a copy.
I have one more
Generally, though,
question.
only accountants and auditors really need that. A library doesn't really need it.
Excuse me, Roger, this is A. Jane Sedan. I have another question.
Okay.
What would be, so you recommend an audit on an annual basis, even for the small libraries, and
Something you may not, I hate to, it
Or
is,
not an
I consider an
audit, but-
audit, but legally it's not an audit as required by law. So, just
Right.
some audit type report.
right? And what would be a reasonable expense for that? What,
Oh,
on,
gosh.
on your experience?
I'm afraid I don't really have much experience there because we do have an audit both for the system and the public library here. I just off the top of my head, and this is pure guess, I would think, several $100s would probably do it if you're, you didn't go to a CPA, just someone who did bookkeeping.
Thank you.
I may be totally unrealistic there. I don't know. Okay,
Roger,
that brings
Roger?
me, yeah.
right. I had another question regarding the audit or a review of your books. Are you recommending annually? If the board decided to do a review only every 5 years of it, is that acceptable or not?
Well, I think that's better than nothing. I think I would want to see it at least every couple of years. Every year would be better.
Okay,
I
thank
say
you.
we never asked for that, and it's not legally required. So, it is really up to you, but, it depends on your comfort level.
Yeah, it was just the expense of
I
doing it.
will tell you this, you might think that libraries are not places that are rife with the potential for financial malfeasance, but we have discovered otherwise. We've had several SEK libraries over the year where, some financial shenanigans have gone on. So, if you can have something done every year, that's what I'd recommend.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. All
Well, this
right,
is it.
it's just time for open discussion or questions now, and we are almost at the end of the appointed time, but I will stay as long as there's still questions coming.
We have the room until 11, so if you want to stay.
Actually, we won't be kicked out even then. So.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh, you mean till 12?
Oh, yeah, 12, sorry.
Okay,
Okay, Roger, I do have another question. This is AJ again.
all right.
Other than the 65% previously mentioned for, recommended on the budget, like 65% of the budget goes to personnel.
Uh-huh.
Are there system guidelines or clauses in Kansas state law regarding library personnel wages and benefits? Like what is considered best practice to pay a librarian?
If I'm understanding you right, no, there are. Actually, or maybe there are, depending on what you mean. In the same standards, there are recommended minimums for library directors. It doesn't go into other staff members.
Okay, and
but that's the only other that and the Fair Labor Standards Act. You have to pay at least minimum wage. You have to pay time and a half for overtime and those sorts of things.
Mhm. Do you know off the top of your head what the amount is for the library director? I'm sure it depends on
and
experience.
it depends on the size of the library. There's a whole chart there. So you can find that online if you go to systems.mykansaslibrary.org. That's a website shared by all 7 regional library systems for sort of joint projects. And you can find the standards there and you can take a look at them. And there's probably a hard copy in your library as well.
Thank you.
We do have a question. Are fundraisers, memorials, and book sales considered donations or part of a general budget?
That's kind of up to you. They're not required to be put into your budget. They can be kept off budget. especially if you keep them in a separate bank account. But if you want to include them in your budget, if your experience shows income from those sorts of things are reliable enough year to year, you want to plug it into your operating budget and count on that, yeah, you can do it. But you're not required to.
Will you be sending out notes on your PowerPoint?
Well, not notes, but the PowerPoint itself will be on our website.
Okay, thank you.
And this video will be on our website, or linked to from our website, I should say.
Mhm.
Roger,
What other questions do you have?
this is Cindy from Moran. I would like to use some
Can
of,
you move in closer to the mic or speak up a little bit?
yeah, sure. Can you hear me better now?
Marginally, maybe. Go ahead. We'll see.
I'd like to use this for board training. Would that be appropriate?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is a topic that is appropriate for board training. So any board members who are here today, that can count at allocation time next year for that board members, fulfilling that requirement. Or if you want to show it to board members at a board meeting from the video that will be on the web, you can certainly do that. Yes. Other questions? I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now. No need to say I'm there. That way I can see things a little bit better. All right. Well, thank you for coming. If there aren't any questions, we'll go ahead and end it shortly. Are there any wrap-up things you need to say, Eric?
Oh, no, just a reminder, Keep It Legal is coming up and we'll hopefully see you there. If you haven't signed up for that. That's all I
Okay.
have.